And I'm introducing Julie McKay, who's the Executive Director of the Australian National Committee for UN Women. Julie advocates on key issues affecting women, including women's leadership, pay equity, political participation, and violence against women. With experience in both the corporate and NGO sector, Julie actively works to support strong partnerships between the community, the private sector and the government, something we all know is so important. Julie actually sits on the Chief of Defence Forces Gender Equity Advisory Board, a role we can imagine the challenges that Julie faces in. She's also a member of the Australian G20 Steering Committee, and I'd like you to join me in welcoming Julie to the stage. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to see you all back bright again here today. It's my privilege as the Executive Director of the Australian National Committee for UN Women to introduce two messages this morning from extraordinary women contributing to the work of the United Nations. Firstly, I would like to read a message of support from the Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Nanka, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us but has provided a message. For those of you who aren't familiar with her work, she was very actively involved in the struggle to end apartheid in South Africa and has worked for many years in government, the private sector and civil society. So I'll firstly read her message before briefly introducing the video that Helen Clark has provided for the C20 summit. Distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, the G20 is an important decision-making body, and your work as the C20 is vital to ensure that governments are held to account and that the voices of their constituencies are heard. This summit comes at a particularly significant time as the international community works to finalise the post-2015 development agenda, and as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and push for its implementation as a visionary roadmap for gender equality and the empowerment of women. At the C20 Summit, I urge you all to consider the role of women and gender equality in all of your deliberations. Women and girls are uniquely affected by economic stagnation and inequality, infrastructure deficits, climate change, and governance failures. And women and girls are also key agents of change on the front line in efforts to address these global challenges and improve the prospects for peace, inclusive growth and sustainability. During the next decade, 1 billion women will enter the global economy. The potential they represent to drive change and innovation will not be realised without women's full and equal participation in education and the labour market. Today, women and girls pay the price for a lack of infrastructure, in long hours, day after day, fetching water, fuel and food, and in caring for the sick and elderly. They know the limitations they face, and they also know what needs to be done. We can no longer afford to hold back half the population. When women can make decisions, they can provide the solutions. More inclusive governance is better governance. With just 1 in 5 parliamentarians globally, we have everything to gain from making governments and economies more accountable to those they serve. Communities and societies that are more inclusive and more equitable are more resilient. Women's empowerment, full participation and gender equality go hand in hand with sustainable development. So the message from the Executive Director of UN Women resonating very strongly with the messages that we've heard from the C20 over the last couple of days. I'd now like to introduce a video presentation from Helen Clark, the Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. Helen Clark became the Administrator of UNDP in April 2009 and is the first woman to lead the organisation. She's also the Chair of the United Nations Development Group and a committee organising all of the UN funds associated with development through UNDP, its programs and departments, working on development issues around the world. Prior to her appointment with UNDP, Helen Clark served for 9 years as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, serving 3 successive terms from 1998 to 2008. Throughout her tenure as Prime Minister, Helen Clark engaged widely within policy development and advocacy on key issues of international, economic, cultural importance, and all of the issues that we're all here to represent this weekend. Thank you.
Greetings to all attending this summit of civil society leaders from across Australia, other G20 countries and beyond. My thanks go to the Chair of the Australian C20 Steering Committee and CEO of World Vision Australia, Tim Costello, for the invitation to address you briefly today. C20 has a very important role to play in advocating for sustainable development and for globally minded decision making which responds to the wider civic community. Our world shares so many great challenges, ranging from rising inequalities and significant joblessness to climate change. G20 leaders have it within their power to make a difference on all these issues, and I believe C20 advocacy to them is vital. The post-2015 Global Development Agenda will offer new opportunities for the global community to address trans-border challenges and to build a more equitable and sustainable world. But governments will need to look beyond their immediate, individual, national self-interest and determine to work together to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be the centrepiece of the post-2015 agenda. The G20 countries cover more than 66% of the world's population and 85% of global GDP. They have a big influence in international negotiations and on the trajectory for global development. With size, however, must go responsibility. The G20's actions and decisions have impact far beyond its own membership. So it's very important for G20 to engage the wider international community in the debate around the best ways to generate growth, which is both inclusive and sustainable. At the height of the financial crisis, we saw the G20 able to act quickly to maintain global financial stability. Now, its focus needs to be on advancing longer-term global development. At UNDP, we welcome G20's ambition to raise the growth potential of G20 countries, to expand the opportunities available to all people and lift human development. But the collective action taken by G20 needs to help drive inclusive growth, create jobs, and protect the one and only planet which we all share. At UNDP, we agree that infrastructure development should be an area of focus for G20. By investing in needed infrastructure improvements, while upholding social and environmental standards, countries, north and south, can raise productivity, drive inclusive growth and sustainable development, generate decent work. We think it's important for the G20 to be addressing all three dimensions of sustainable development, economic, social and environmental, in its work. By pursuing its growth objective within the context of the wider global post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda, we believe G20 can lead by example and generate new jobs and innovation which will benefit both people and our planet. At UNDP, we're strongly committed to strategic partnerships with NGOs and civil society and to engaging with you as partners. We acknowledge the power of civil society to influence global agendas. Conveying messages to leaders at the Brisbane G20 Summit in November is a vital focus for C20 now. So I wish you all the best for a highly motivational C20 Summit and for your advocacy to G20 leaders on the role they can play in helping to drive a post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda which builds a better world.